Sir, I don't think you understand what kind of establishment this is. I'm only asking for a room.
We're fully booked. No availability at all.
Welcome to the Ravenwood Grand. We have a room available for you.
Why are you making us leave? If they don't want us here, why do they work here? Isn't their job supposed to help people?
Escort them out. Come to the lobby now.
Daddy, do we have to go?
Not tight. Mr. Carter, I'm so sorry you were kept waiting. You didn't know who I was. That's the entire point.
Keep watching the story and follow Mr. Marcus Stories for more powerful moments.
Daniel Carter walked through the revolving doors of his own hotel a little after 11 at night, wearing a gray hoodie gone soft at the seams and jeans that had seen 3 time zones in the last 18 hours. His daughter was asleep against his shoulder, 6 years old, her small fist curled around the ear of a worn rabbit named Biscuit. He asked the young man at the front desk for a room. The clerk looked him over once, slow and deliberate, then leaned forward just far enough to be heard by the 3 people waiting near the lounge. "Sir," he said, "I don't think you understand what kind of establishment this is." 4 minutes later, that same clerk handed 2 key cards to a couple who had never made a reservation, smiling the entire time. When Daniel asked to speak with a manager, he was told to lower his voice in a room where he had not raised it once. And within the hour, security walked him toward the exit past a lobby full of strangers who had no idea the man they were watching leave owned every marble tile beneath their feet. Someone would lose their job before sunrise. If you have ever been looked at and measured before you said a single word, this story is for you. Stay on the end. Daniel had not planned to stop in Denver that night. 14 weeks on the road, splitting time between 3 cities and 100 phone calls, had a way of narrowing a man's wants down to something very small. He wanted a shower. He wanted a bed that didn't fold out of a wall. He wanted to hear his daughter breathe steady beside him, instead of through a cracked phone speaker at 9 at night, 3 states away. His flight into Denver International had been delayed by 90 minutes, and by the time he and Aaliyah cleared the terminal, it was 10:52 p.m. Too late to make the 90-minute drive home to Colorado Springs feel like anything but reckless. So he made the call the way he made most calls, without ceremony, without telling anyone who might make a fuss about it. He knew exactly where he was going. The Ravenwood Grand, downtown 17th floor of glass, looking out over the Front Range, the flagship property of Carter Hospitality Group, the company he had built from a single 72-room motel outside Colorado Springs into 11 properties across 4 states. He had opened this location himself 4 years back, had stood on that same lobby floor and told the launch staff that this building would represent every value he'd spent his adult life trying to prove. He had not walked through those doors in 5 months, and he had not called ahead. That was on purpose. Daniel had a habit of visiting his own properties the way an ordinary guest would. No watch, no branded jacket, no assistant trailing 2 steps behind announcing who he was. His father had worked hotel security for 26 years, most of it on the overnight shift at a Marriott off I-25, and one thing his father used to say had never worn off him. You can learn everything about a place by watching how it treats the people it thinks don't matter, not the ones it's trying to impress. The ones it thinks it can afford to ignore. Aaliyah had fallen asleep somewhere over Kansas and hadn't fully surfaced since. She had her mother's long eyelashes and her father's stubborn chin, and right now she weighed exactly as much as 14 weeks of missing her felt like, which was nothing at all. Daniel carried her with one arm through the revolving door and pushed his suitcase with the other, and the lobby of the Ravenwood Grand opened up in front of him, exactly as he remembered it. Warm light spilling across dark stone floors, a faint thread of piano coming from somewhere near the bar, a long front desk of walnut and brass staffed at this hour by a single clerk with a name tag that read Tyler. Tyler was maybe 26, hair combed with more effort than the hour deserved, wearing the Ravenwood uniform with the kind of precision that suggested he took the look of the job more seriously than the substance of it. He glanced up when Daniel approached, and something in his face recalibrated, quiet and quick, the particular shift of a man's expression when his eyes finish delivering a verdict his mouth hasn't caught up to yet. He looked at the hoodie. He looked at the sleeping child. He looked back down at his screen a half-second longer than the screen required. "Good evening," Daniel said. "I need a room for the night, just the 2 of us. Doesn't need to be anything fancy." Tyler kept his eyes on the monitor. Then he leaned in, voice pitched with the careful precision of a man performing for an audience he assumed was on his side. Sir, this really isn't the kind of place you can just walk into. The sentence landed with a particular weight in the empty air between them. Not loud, not angry, just certain. The way people talk when they want a humiliation to feel inevitable instead of personal. A woman near the lounge glanced over her wine glass. Daniel didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on Tyler and said evenly, "I'm asking for a room. That's all I'm doing right now." "I'm sorry, sir," Tyler said, straightening. "We're fully booked tonight. No availability at all." "Nothing?" Daniel asked. "Not a suite. A standard room, one bed, one pull-out. You just need somewhere to sleep before 6 a.m. Tyler repeated himself with the smooth, over-rehearsed patience of a man who had delivered this exact line more than once tonight. "Fully booked, sir. I do apologize for the inconvenience. There are a few other properties within a mile that might have something available." Them. Daniel didn't answer right away. He looked at Tyler's face, not with anger, but with the quiet, cataloging attention of a man collecting evidence he already suspected he would need. Then, at 11:04 p.m., the revolving door spun again behind him. A couple walked in, the man in a navy blazer, with no tie, the woman in a wool coat that cost more than most people's monthly rent. They moved the way people move when experience has taught them that rooms are always available, because in their case, they always had been. Tyler's entire posture changed before they even reached the counter. His shoulders lifted, his smile arrived fast, easy, and entirely real. "Welcome to the Ravenwood Grand," he said. "Do you have a reservation with us this evening?" They did not. They were walk-ins, exactly as Daniel was, standing 11 feet away with his sleeping daughter on his shoulder. But 3 minutes Tyler had pulled up a room, run a card, and slid 2 key cards across the walnut counter with a warmth that filled the whole lobby. Daniel watched every second of it without a word, because the message had already been delivered clean and complete, and both men standing at that desks understood exactly what had happened, even if only one of them was willing to say so out loud. Alia stirred against his shoulder. "Daddy," she mumbled, half into the fabric of his hoodie, "are we at the hotel yet?" "We're here, baby," he said, tightening his arm around her. "Give me 1 more minute." He turned back to the desk. From, his voice stayed level, the way still water stays level, not because nothing was moving underneath it, but because whatever was moving hadn't decided to surface yet. "I'd like to speak with your manager on duty, please." Something flickered across Tyler's face, quick and covered fast. He picked up the desk phone and made a short call, and Daniel waited, looking around the lobby at the guests in the lounge chairs, at the young woman behind the concierge desk pretending to sort papers she'd already sorted, at the warm light and the dark stone and the faint piano still going, oblivious, from somewhere near the bar. He wondered, not for the first time in 14 years of building this company, what happens to the things you build once you hand the keys to somebody else. The manager arrived at 11:09 p.m. His name tag read Gregory, mid-40s, the kind of man who wore a full suit at midnight because in his understanding authority was a thing you maintained through appearances. He had clearly been briefed on his way down, because he arrived with a conclusion already formed, not an open question. "Sir," positioning himself beside Tyler in a way that made the geometry of the room obvious, 2 of them on one side of the counter, Daniel alone on the other with a sleeping child. "I understand there's some confusion. My staff has already explained we don't have availability tonight. There's nothing further I can do for you." "There's no confusion," Daniel said. "I watched your staff book a room for a walk in couple 2 minutes after telling me there was nothing available. I'd like you to explain that to me." Gregory's jaw set, the particular hardening of a position that has already decided to dismiss whoever's challenging it. "My staff exercise their professional judgment, and I stand behind it fully." "Your professional judgment," Daniel repeated. "That's correct." For a long moment, Daniel said nothing at all. Etscom, he thought about his father, about 26 years of overnight shifts, about the uniform his father used to hang by the door with the elbows worn thin, about the way his father would come home some mornings and sit at the kitchen table for 10 full minutes before he could talk again. His father had never called it anger. He'd called it tired in a very specific way, and Daniel had understood what he meant even as a boy who didn't yet have the words for it. Standing in his own lobby now, his daughter's breath warmed his neck. Daniel felt that some tired clarity settle over him. solid and unhurried. Damn. He wasn't going to reveal himself yet. Not because he wanted to draw it out, but because if this was happening here, in the property meant to set the standard for the other 10, he needed to understand the full shape of it before he did anything at all. I'd like your full name and title, he said, for the record. Gregory gave both without warmth. Daniel noted them quietly, the way he noted everything, and stepped back to find a seat in the lobby, settling Alik against him, and waited to see what came next. He didn't wait long. Gregory hadn't gone back to wherever managers go at midnight. He stationed himself near the desk, arms folded, watching Daniel the way a man watches a problem he hasn't figured out how to remove yet. Every few minutes his eyes crossed the lobby, and each time they carried the same unspoken line. You're still here, and I need you not to be. Daniel noticed the whispered exchange between Gregory and Tyler that made the younger man's spine go rigid. He noticed the concierge, name tag reading Emily, keeping her eyes fixed on her desk while her hands had gone completely still. He noticed two guests at the bar who had gone quiet in the last several minutes, their attention drifting toward him without quite committing to it. The lobby had developed a very particular kind of tension, the kind that forms when a room senses something is wrong and is waiting for someone else to say it first. Daniel had seen that shape before, not in this building, but in enough rooms across enough years to recognize it on sight. It was the tension of people who know an injustice is happening in front of them and have each, privately, decided it isn't their place to name it. Gregory made his move at 11:26 p.m. He crossed the lobby with the measured stride of a man performing authority rather than holding it, stopped a few feet from Daniel's chair, and spoke in the lowered voice specifically designed to sound discreet while still being heard by everyone nearby. Sir, I've given you plenty of time, and I need to be straightforward. This is private property. You've been informed there's no availability, and continuing to occupy this lobby isn't something we're going to allow. Sitting in a chair, Daniel said. I haven't raised my voice. I haven't caused a single disruption, and I haven't given you any grounds to ask me to leave. I'm not asking, Gregory said. The room shifted. A guest at the bar set his glass down without drinking from it. Emily's head lifted slightly and then dropped again. Daniel looked at Gregory's face, at the certainty sitting there, complete and untroubled, the expression of a man who had never once considered he might be the one who was wrong, and felt something settle low in his chest that wasn't anger. It was older than anger, more deliberate. Then call security, Daniel said. I want this on record. Gregory's jaw tightened. He gave a short nod toward the far end of the lobby, where two security officers had apparently been waiting exactly for that signal. They crossed the floor with the patient heaviness of men who had performed this walk before and positioned themselves on either side of Daniel's chair, close enough to make the intention plain without a single word spoken. That was the moment Aaliyah woke up. She surfaced the way children do, not gradually but all at once, blinking into the light and taking in the whole scene in a single sweep, the two large men, the tension in her father's shoulders, Gregory's expression. She sat up straighter, pulling Biscuit tight against her chest, and looked at the security officers with the frank, unguarded curiosity of someone who hasn't yet learned to pretend she doesn't see what's right in front of her. Then she looked at Gregory directly. Why are you making us leave? She asked. Her voice was clear, unhurried, carrying that particular quality children's voices get in quiet rooms, one that traveled farther than she meant it to, reaching the couple by the elevator, the guests at the bar, Emily at her desk. Gregory didn't answer her. He looked at Daniel instead, which was its own kind of answer. Alia. Alia looked at her father, then back at Gregory, working through the problem with the methodical seriousness of a 6-year-old who takes questions very literally. If they don't want us here, she said, why do they work here? Isn't their job supposed to be helping people? There was no accusation in the question. It was entirely sincere, the kind of question only a child asks, the kind that lands harder in a quiet room than anything rehearsed ever could. The couple by the elevator turned fully now. The guests at the bar had stopped pretending to look elsewhere. Even the security officer on Daniel's left shifted his weight in a way that suggested something in him was uncomfortable standing exactly where he was standing. Daniel looked down at his daughter, keeping his voice warm and level the way he always did when he wanted her to understand the world's failures weren't hers to carry. You didn't do anything wrong, baby, he said. Not one thing. He waited until she nodded, then straightened and looked at Gregory again. Something had shifted in Gregory's face too, though not the way it should have. The certainty was still there, but underneath it something had cracked. Not into doubt, into irritation, at the attention he hadn't wanted, at a dynamic he could no longer smooth over. And some men, when they feel control slipping, tighten their grip harder. Gregory was exactly that kind of man. "This has gone on long enough," he said, dropping every last pretense of hospitality. He looked at the officers. "Escort them out." The officer on the left stepped forward. Daniel stood slowly, careful with Aaliyah, keeping her close against his side. He didn't resist. He didn't raise his voice. But he didn't move toward the door either. Not yet. And he stood in the center of that lobby looking at Gregory with the expression of a man who had seen everything he needed to see and was now deciding what to do with it. Phones had come out around the room, not held up conspicuously, just angled quietly in his direction, capturing the specific geometry of the moment. A black man in a gray hoodie, his 6-year-old daughter clutching a stuffed rabbit, 2 security officers, a manager whose face had already decided how this would end. Daniel reached into the pocket of his hoodie and took out his phone. He found a number, pressed call, and held it to his ear. The call lasted 41 seconds. He said 5 sentences, listened for maybe 8, and hung up. He put the pocket back in his pocket and stood quietly, one hand resting on Alia's shoulder. "Daddy," she said quietly, "just for him, do we have to go?" "Not tonight," he said. "We're not going anywhere tonight." Gregory heard it and took a step forward, patience finally spent. "Sir, I am telling you for the last time," the elevator chimed. It was a small, ordinary sound, the kind the lobby produced dozens of times a night without anyone noticing. But every person in that room noticed this one. The doors opened at 11:41 p.m., and Walter Simmons stepped out, CEO of Carter Hospitality Group, silver-haired. Dressed in a suit he had clearly not had time to fully straighten before coming down. 2 members of the executive board flanked him, moving with the barely contained urgency of people who understood exactly what they were walking into. Walter crossed the lobby directly to Daniel. He didn't look at Gregory. He didn't look at Tyler. He looked at Daniel the way a man looks at someone he's just realized he has failed, and he stopped in front of him and said, with a formality that carried real weight behind it, "Mr. Carter, I'm so sorry you were kept waiting." The lobby went silent, not dramatically the way it happens in movies, but the way it happens in real life, one sound dropping out at a time until nothing was left but that faint piano, which suddenly felt completely wrong for the occasion. Walter turned to face the front desk. His voice stayed even, which somehow made it land harder than shouting would have. "This is Daniel Carter," he said. "He is the founder and majority owner of Carter Hospitality Group. He owns this hotel. He owns the desk you're standing behind, the uniforms you're wearing, and the paychecks that decide whether you're here tomorrow." He let that sit for one full breath. "I want everyone in this lobby to be completely clear about what happened tonight." Tyler had gone the color of the stone counter beneath his hands. Gregory hadn't moved, standing in the center of the floor with the stillness of a man whose entire understanding of the situation had just been restructured without warning, and who hadn't yet worked out what to do inside the new version of it. Aaliyah looked up at Walter, then at her father, then back at Walter. She pulled Biscuit tighter and leaned into Daniel's side. "Daddy," she whispered, "you know this man?" Daniel looked down at her, and for the first time since the revolving door, something in his face went fully soft. "Yeah, baby," he said, "I know this man." Nobody moved for several seconds after Walter finished speaking. That was the thing Daniel noticed most, the complete absence of motion in a room that had minutes earlier been building toward something loud. Gregory stood frozen in the middle of the floor. Tyler had both hands flat against the counter like he needed it to hold him up. The 2 officers had already stepped back on their own, creating distance from a situation whose shape had just changed underneath them. Even the guests who'd been filming lowered their phones slightly, caught between the instinct to keep recording and the sense that this moment required something more than between them and it. Gregory found his voice first, which was either brave or foolish, and turned out to be both. "Mr. Carter, I want to explain. We had no way of knowing the circumstances weren't. Every sentence started with confidence and ran out of it before it found a period." He wasn't exactly lying. He genuinely hadn't known who Daniel was. But Daniel had spent enough years in enough rooms to understand that not knowing isn't the same as not being responsible, and some part of Gregory understood that too, underneath all the scrambling, which was exactly why none of his sentences could find their way to an end. Daniel let him finish. He didn't interrupt, didn't shift his expression, didn't give Gregory a single thing to push against. When the words finally stopped coming, he spoke. "You're right," Daniel said. "You didn't know who I was. That's the entire point." His voice carried across the lobby without any effort at all, because everything else in the room had gone quiet enough to carry it for him. "Everything you did tonight, you did because you looked at me and decided I wasn't worth the standard. Not because of anything I said, not because of anything I did. Yet from, because of what I looked like walking it through that door at 11 o'clock. And you did it in front of my daughter." Gregory opened his mouth. Daniel kept going, voice still level, still unhurried. "My father worked hotel security for 26 years. He came home every single morning carrying something that never fully left him, the weight of being dismissed by people who'd already decided, before he opened his mouth, that he didn't matter. I built this company because I believed it didn't have to work that way. That the person walking up to your front desk deserves basic dignity before they've proven anything to you. Not after you've checked their clothes and decided whether they look like they belong. Before." Walter gave a short nod and looked at Gregory. "You didn't just fail one customer tonight," Daniel said quietly. "You failed every single person who has ever walked through a door like this one and been made to feel like they didn't belong. And you did it with a 6-year-old standing right there watching you do it." Gregory tried one more sentence. It didn't get far. Daniel cut through it, not loudly, just finally. "Gregory," he said, "you're terminated effective immediately." He looked at Walter, who stepped aside to make the call. Gregory's face settled into something gray and inward. Whatever argument was still in him, he chose not to spend it. He straightened his jacket once, the small automatic gesture of a man trying to salvage the last piece of dignity he had left, and walked toward the back office without another word. Tyler was next. Daniel crossed to the front desk slowly, giving the younger man time to see it coming. Tyler looked like he hadn't taken a full breath in several minutes, jaw-tight eyes carrying the particular shine of someone working hard to hold themselves together in public. Daniel stopped at the counter and looked at him directly. "You made a choice tonight based on how someone looked," he said. "I want you to sit with that. Not what it cost you professionally. What it actually feels like on the other side of it." He kept his voice even, not unkind. "I'm not ending your career here, but you're going into a full retraining program, values-based, not skills-based. You're going to spend real time learning what this work is actually for. If you come out the other side and still want to be part of this company, the door stays open. But what happened tonight cannot happen again. Not to anyone." Tyler nodded. It was a small movement, but it was real. "Not from." Daniel walked to the concierge desk, where Emily had stood motionless through the entire thing, hands flat on the surface in front of her, wearing the particular tension of someone waiting to find out if she's in trouble for something she didn't do. He stopped in front of her and kept his voice quiet, just for her. "You saw it," he said. "You knew something was wrong, and you couldn't say anything. I understand why the structure here made that hard, and that's a failure of leadership, not a failure of character." Emily opened her mouth to apologize anyway, and Daniel kept going before she could. "But I watched you tonight. The way you tracked everything happening, the way some part of you clearly knew exactly where the line was, even when you couldn't cross it. That matters. Starting tomorrow, you're moving into a guest services supervisor role, because I need people in positions where they can actually act on what they already know is right." Emily's expression moved through several things before it landed somewhere between relief and resolve. "I won't let you down," she said. "I know," Daniel said simply. He turned to face the room. The guests who remained were watching him openly now, phones down, just waiting to hear what came next. Daniel spoke without any preamble, because the thing he needed to say wasn't the kind of thing decoration improved. "I've been building hotels for 14 years, he said, "and there's exactly one standard I've never once negotiated on. Every person who walks through our doors gets treated with respect. Not based on what they're wearing, not based on what they look like at 11 at night with a suitcase and a tired kid on their shoulder. Every person, every single time, no exceptions. That's not a slogan. That's what this company actually is." He looked around the lobby one last time, at the desk, at the bar, at the stone floor. His father had never once been allowed to cross as anything but an employee. "If anyone here can't commit to that," he said, "I'd genuinely rather you find somewhere else to work. Not as a threat, just as the truth of what we're building here." There. The room held those words for a moment. Then Aliyah, who had been standing beside her father through the whole thing, biscuit tucked under her arm and her face, carrying the serious, focused look of a 6-year-old determined to understand the world correctly, tugged once on his hand. "Daddy," she said, "can we get our room now? I'm really tired." Something moved through the lobby then, not quite laughter, but something close enough to it, the sound a room makes when tension finally finds somewhere to go. Even Walter pressed his lips together against a smile. Daniel looked down at his daughter, at her earnest face and her worn stuffed rabbit and her completely uncomplicated sincerity, and felt the thing that had been sitting in his chest all night finally shift. Not disappear. Just move over and make room for something else. "Yeah, baby," he said. "We're getting our room." The story didn't stay inside that lobby. Within a week, 3 former guests came forward publicly, each one describing an eerily similar night at Ravenwood Properties over the past 2 years. Robert Hale, a disabled Army veteran, described being told there was no vacancy at the Ravenwood in Colorado Springs while wearing his old fatigue jacket, only to watch 2 college students in matching Letterman jackets get checked in behind him without a reservation. Denise Carver, a single mother traveling alone with 2 kids after a 5-hour drive, described a Ravenwood front desk employee asking her out loud in front of her children whether she was sure she could afford the room before even running her card. James Whitfield, an elderly black man traveling to his granddaughter's college graduation, said a Ravenwood clerk had asked to see 2 additional forms of ID beyond his driver's license, a request no other guest in line that night had received. None of the 3 had ever met Daniel Carter. None of them had known who owned the company they were describing. Damn. Once their accounts reached the company's internal investigations team, all 3 cases matched a pattern the board had never formally tracked, because no one below Daniel's level had ever been asked to look for it. The consequences moved fast once the board got involved. Gregory Pierce's termination stood, and Carter Hospitality Group's legal team confirmed in a statement released the following month that he would not be eligible for rehire at any property under the company's ownership. An internal audit found that guest complaints involving perceived discrimination at 4 of the company's 11 properties had been closed without formal review for the better part of 18 months. A gap Walter Simmons personally apologized for in a 5-minute video posted to the company's website, filmed without a script, without notes, and without a single mention of legal liability. The company established a $4,217.83 per incident restitution fund for the 3 guests who'd come forward, a number that made no obvious sense to anyone outside the company until Walter explained in the same video that it was the exact average nightly rate across all 11 Ravenwood properties. Because that was the minimum stay, Daniel insisted every affected guest be compensated for in full, plus 1 extra night on the house. The company also rolled out a mandatory training program across every property, built not by an outside consulting firm but by Daniel himself alongside Emily Foster, who by then had been promoted twice, first to supervisor and then 4 months later to director of guest experience for the entire Colorado region. The training had one rule at its center, printed on a laminated card kept behind every front desk in the company. You do not decide who deserves a room by looking at them first. Damn. 3 months after that night, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon at 2:14 p.m., a family came through the revolving doors of the Ravenwood Grand. 2 parents, travel-worn, dressed for comfort instead of impressions, with 2 kids trailing behind them, one of them dragging an oversized backpack, and refusing every offer of help with the absolute conviction of a child who considered it a matter of principle. Emily was working the floor when they walked in. She crossed the lobby to meet them before they even reached the desk, introduced herself by name, and asked how she could make their stay easier. She didn't look at their shoes. She didn't look at their luggage. She looked at their tired eyes and the stubborn kid with the backpack, and she smiled the way people smile when they actually mean it. Damn. Within 2 minutes, the parents' shoulders had dropped an inch. Within 5, even the kid with the backpack had let someone carry it for him. The far corner of the lobby, Daniel stood with Aliyah beside him. He'd come for a scheduled site visit that afternoon, wearing a jacket instead of a hoodie, though Aaliyah had still insisted on bringing Biscuit. They'd been standing there for 10 minutes, and Daniel hadn't announced himself to the floor yet, because he'd wanted to watch this first, the ordinary, unremarkable version of the thing he'd spent 14 years trying to build. Aaliyah watched Emily lead the family toward the desk, watched the kids brighten when Emily said something that made them laugh, then looked up at her father. "Is that what it's supposed to look like?" she asked. Daniel watched the tired parents exhale, watched the boy with the backpack finally let it go. "Yeah," he said. "That's exactly what it's supposed to look like." There. Aaliyah considered that with the quiet thoroughness she brought to most things, then nodded once, tucked Biscuit under her arm, and reached up to take her father's hand. Daniel held it, and the two of them stood together in the corner of the lobby he had built, watching it finally become what he had always meant it to be. There. Every person deserves to be treated with dignity before they prove anything to you, before you see what they have, before you decide on your own whether they belong. That isn't just good business, that's just what's right. This story is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to real hotels, companies, or individuals is coincidental. It was written to reflect real patterns of bias and everyday discrimination that many people still experience, in the hope that stories like this one make it a little harder to look away from them. If this one stayed with you, hit subscribe and stick around for more. Disclaimer. This story is a work of fiction created for entertainment and educational purposes only. All characters, names, businesses, and events depicted are entirely fictional and do not represent any real person, living or dead, or any actual establishment. Any resemblance to real persons, organizations, or events is purely coincidental. This content is intended to explore themes of human dignity, workplace ethics, and social justice through narrative storytelling. It does not make factual claims about any individual, company, or institution.